If there's anybody interested is willing to do what we call Sierra Club 101, back in that corner. It's everything you ever wanted to know about the Sierra Club, but we're afraid to ask. He does it in about 10 minutes. So keep that in mind. Well, we've got a busy night, so I think we're going to get right down to our committee reports. And I'm going to start with the Conservation Committee, Chris Gouldy.
Right, and I'm going to hand it immediately to Cyrus.
Oh.
You have
Surprise!
two conservation-related announcements to make. Cyrus is our acting director of the Lone Star chapter.
To be or not to be as acting director. It's actually, the last time I was acting director. This time, because they knew I like to act, they made it interim director. So, I'm not sure. I'm also conservation director. So, if you are a new Sierra Club, if you're going to be a new Sierra Club member and sign up for the Dallas Sierra Club, not only will you get the monthly newsletter, email newsletter from Dallas, you also get the Lone Star chapter, which is more state issues. And so that's one of the advantages of Sierra Club, right? There's a local Sierra Club, a state Sierra Club, and a national Sierra Club. So I've got two announcements. The first is, there's a big hearing happening right here in Big D next Thursday all day. Now remember, under the last administration, a lot of Sierra Club and other groups spent a lot of time trying to get better environmental regulations. One of the better environmental regulations that we got were regulations on methane pollution from oil and gas facilities. Well, what does this current president like to do? He likes to roll back regulations. So the EPA, which is supposed to be about environmental protection, has a proposal out, which is to not regulate methane, which not only hurts our health but cooks our planet, the climate, not regulate it, and they have a proposal. They are having one hearing in the entire country. Where is it? Dallas. It is next Thursday from 8 to 5. But if you want to go and speak about why this is a bad idea, you have to register with EPA by the 14th, which I believe is Monday. So you have to register to speak a few days before. A lot of groups will be there. Sierra Club will be there. Public Citizen will be there. Earthworks will be there. There will be a green room at the nearby. Anyway, I've got some material here that I will leave with all that information. So if you're interested in going and telling your story. And we will also be sending out an email alert about this week, and Rita also has a page about it there. So I'll leave some literature somewhere up here at the front about how you sign up and all that stuff. So that's announcement number one. I'm already taking too long. Announcement number two is we at the Sierra Club state office just released a new website. You remember about 3 years ago, the state office released a website called the Texas Water Conservation Scorecard, which was all about water conservation. Well, we just released a new website this week about clean energy, TexasCleanEnergyScorecard.com, and I will leave these as well. How did your electric provider do? Did they do things for energy efficiency? Did they do renewable energy programs? We looked at all their public information, rated them, and unfortunately most of them failed, but some of them are doing better than others. So I just want folks to know about that website, because this is a good way to think about if you're in a competitive area and can choose, what are those reps doing? If you're in an area like Denton that has their own municipal utility, or Garland, what are they doing? And you can take action and tell them to do better. So those are my two announcements, and I'll stop talking because I'm talking too much right now.
Okay. Next.
Yeah.
Victoria Howard.
Yeah.
That's okay, Victoria.
The rest of the conservation announcements. I thought you were going to talk about the survey.
I think you
There are handouts over there in front of the boards about the survey that the City of Dallas is conducting. If you live or work in Dallas, please take the survey before the end of the month to help those who are designing the city's clean action or climate action plan to help them do what you want them to do. And we've got information about that again on the conservation page of the website, along with a link to some a couple of pages of ideas if you really don't know what you want them to do. Lots of things for you to think about. I'm going to pass the rest of our announcements around here on this clipboard, or you can just look at the website. All this information is also on the conservation page of DallasSierraClub.org.
Thank you, Chris. Mark Stein, Outings Committee.
Hey, good weather for outings is here.
Liz, you can come up. You can come up too, can't you?
Mark's going to do it.
Mark's doing it. Mark's
And
doing
so
it.
it's good weather time, and we've got outings. This Saturday, Canyon Ridge at Fort Worth, the Canyon Ridge Trail at Fort Worth Nature Center. Details are on the outings page. What's the address? DallasSierraClub.org. The next weekend, it's Beavers Bend weekend. We've still got cabins and tent spaces available, $40 a person. It's near Beavers Bend State Park near Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Really good place with running water and flush toilets. So you can camp and still have all those benefits. And hot showers. Wendell, what are we going to do for entertainment on Saturday night?
Well, there is a rumor going around that the legend of the headless tent camper is going to be after you have your meal. We will have a wonderful after meal presentation, and some of the leaders that have done many miles on the trails will be giving their special take on Halloween. So this is really one of the best family events we have. It's total beginners all the way up to advanced, and it's inexpensive, and that's a beautiful, we had a picture up here. It is a beautiful part of Oklahoma, right on the edge of the mountains with Arkansas. So low cost, it's a really fun weekend. Thank you, Mark.
What's the reservation deadline?
Well, it's the 15th of October, isn't it, Liz? But watch out, because there's no mail delivery on the 14th, so get your reservations in the mail by Thursday, okay? And if you survive Beavers Bend State Park, the following weekend you can do a 9-mile walk around White Rock Lake on that Saturday. Saturday, November 16th, John Bunker Sands Wetlands. It's an educational outing. It'll be a good trip. That's not too far south of Dallas. And the Beavers Bend trip this year is the first week in February.
Big Bend.
The Big Bend. Get these bends, they're confusing. Beavers Bend in October, Big Bend in February. And the Big Bend trip, of the 27 places on the bus, 19 of them are gone already. So get your reservations in quickly. You won't be able to if you procrastinate. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Ginger Bradley, membership. Do you want to say anything? Not a thing. This is Ginger. Okay.
3 places throughout the room. You'll see a balloon and a placard and a little slip so you can take information and contact. I get all of your information on Forbes or Beavers Bend.
Okay, what was I doing? Let's see. Who's going to be next?
Programs?
No, they're last so they can introduce the speaker. How about the political committee? David Griggs.
David for president.
All right, thanks everybody. Okay, we're going to do our political report real quick tonight because I've got some special guests here I want to recognize. Most of you have seen the little flyer that's in front of you. If not, I have some more here. This has to do with the propositions on the November 5th ballot that Sierra Club has endorsed. Those are 2, 5, and 8. 2 of them deal with water issues, and number 5 deals with putting the sporting goods tax toward the Texas Historical Commission and state parks. So I hope you will support those 3. We're not taking a position on the other 7, but do vote. And I really want to emphasize voting this time, whether you're really interested in these or not, because it's a trial run, at least in Dallas County, for our new voting equipment. So I would encourage you to go vote in a short line, get familiar with our new voting equipment, and then next year for the primary and the general election, you'll be familiar with it. But if you do vote, please support Props 2, 5, and 8. The other things that I want to do is that we occasionally have candidates, members of the House of Representatives and other political members who are here, and we sometimes have their aides. And we are pleased tonight to have the Chief of Staff of State Representative Michelle Beckley, Carrie Crothers. So would you stand and let us thank you for coming. Michelle represents District 65, which is essentially the Carrollton part of Denton County and some other parts of Denton County. But we are really pleased. Michelle was one of the 6 area Democrats who were elected in Dallas County. And you know there were 12 pickups across the state. And so it's really exciting to have an area Carrollton state rep that is representing us and that has voted very, very well. I don't know what your boss's voting record was, but it was a pretty good one. It was good.
It's good. We still haven't released our legislative scorecard, David. I know.
Okay, we're waiting on that, Cyrus. Okay, very good. Y'all met Cyrus, our director, earlier. All right, the other thing I want to do before I go is talk to you just a little bit about the climate strike that we had here on campus. Most of you know that I work here part-time, have done so for many, many years. And so we had our very own climate strike here on campus. And if you get the current edition of the Brookhaven Courier, you'll see the article. It starts on the front page and it goes to page 5. And if you'll notice, the young man here in front of the crowd with the bullhorn was none other than the president of our student green team here on campus, and that's Ricky. So I want you to stand up. Ricky Thielen is our green team student leader, and so he had a great time. We enjoyed that much. Most of you know Carrie Schweitzer, who's recently retired as the sustainability director here on campus. And I want to bring up our new sustainability director. If you want to say a word or two, this is Brandon Morton. Brandon is no stranger to Sierra Club. He has been on our executive committee for the state for a term, and he's now going to be here on campus taking Carrie's job as our new sustainability director. Do you want to say a word or two about the subject?
Thank you, David, and it's a pleasure to be here and taking over our grand leader of Brookhaven, Carrie Schweitzer, who's retired. Yeah, sorry. But let's give Carrie another round of applause. And she is now in charge of sustaining retirement, so it's a big challenge. So I just wanted to welcome all of you. For me, as the new sustainability director on the campus, we're glad to have Dallas Sierra Club here. It's been a great opportunity to work with you all over the years. I've known David since before I started working for the Dallas Community College and my volunteer work with Sierra Club and the Lone Star chapter at the state level. So I'm looking forward to getting more involved in meeting some of you, and I hope you continue to use Brookhaven as a resource for your volunteer and community needs. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Don't forget to vote on November 5th. There are some other, Sarah, you raise your hand, another Brookhaven student who's here in one of my classes. So thanks very much, and I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thank you, David. Before we get to the program, let me just quickly introduce our secretary, Christina Barrera. She won't stand up. And most importantly, our refreshments coordinator, Jasmine Chow. Who have I left out? I see Molly Rook over there. I don't know what to say about Molly Rook.
I made it up here.
She's here. I think we're ready. Have I left anybody out? Anything I didn't do I was supposed to do? No. Okay, so now we're going to get to our program. We're going to bring up, we have two people who co-chair our program committee, which is important. They get our speakers. So here we go. And they're going to introduce our speakers.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Renee Robertson. I'm one of the co-chairs. And
I'm Victoria Howard, the other co-chair and the chair of recycling.
we're always looking for ideas or opportunities. You guys have any speakers, just let us know. And I need to go in order so I don't forget anything. We have flyers for the next speaker. And this one is going to be Dan LaFell, I think if I'm saying that correctly. He's going to present photography from 3 diverse areas of the world. And that's in November. Then, as you guys leave, the way we get the room packed with speakers is word of mouth, advertising, posting. So one of the things I do is I take a lot of them to parts of town where they may not be exposed to it. So I pass out a lot of flyers south. So if you guys would take flyers and take a few, pass them out at the schools, coffee shops, libraries, that kind of thing, that would help us get the room packed. The other thing, we also have a sign-in sheet for November and for December. If you are able to, if you'd like to contribute to our refreshments, if there's something there you'd like to see, maybe you could, give us an idea. This is what I'd like to have instead of what we have there. But I think our refreshments are pretty cool. So, did I leave anything out? Oh, I have, and we also have at the back of the room, I've got 3 special guests. 2 may be members by now, though. Alinka, could you please stand up? And Mia. And then our other speaker, NAACP, is that correct? Our other guests?
Yes. I'm just here today.
Okay, that's fine. We have people come, look, see if they like what they hear, because we're trying to collaborate with a lot of diverse communities so that we can help, because Dallas is full of racial injustices, Dallas is full of environmental injustices. So we want to try to come together and get rid of those things, dumb it down. So without further ado, I'm going to.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay, good. I'm going to introduce our speakers. Dr. Terry Perry, Sierra Club member, and Dottie Perry is a climate reality leader. They're both climate reality leaders. And climate change and social justice is what they will be exposing us to today. So we look forward to their talk.
Thank you very much for being here.
Good evening, I'm Tony, and let me introduce Dottie. We're Sierra Club members, both of us, and we're also climate reality leaders. And I'm going to ask you a question tonight, and you don't have to answer it now, but at the end, I hope. How many of you believe that climate change is already making us sick, and making some of us sicker than others?
I hope by the end. Okay. Well, there we go.
There we go.
That's what happens when I talk.
Hypothetically. I
want to start by telling you
the story
of Kirill McBride Johnson.
Your mic's not working too well.
It's not working too well.
Well, it's on and off, on and off.
Oh, geez.
Try this one.
There's a third one up there that's working.
Why don't you try that one?
This one working?
Yes.
Good.
I'm going to tell you the story about Kirill McBride Johnson. Kirill was a 13-year-old man who loved the Dallas Cowboys, and he loved football. And middle school, he went out for his middle school football team. And on the second day of practice, he had a heat stroke, a seizure, and died on the football field. And on her birthday, his mother scattered his ashes on that football field.
This was right down near here in Crowley ISD, just south of Fort Worth.
So I want you to imagine a future where our children have to wear a mask to go outdoors, or can't breathe without wheezing, or have to drink dirty, polluted water, or can't play outside because of the heat, like Pharrell couldn't, or because of disease-carrying insects. That's climate change. And this could be our children's world by 2030. Climate change may cause up to 700,000 extra deaths by that year. And cigarette smoking and secondhand smoke only causes about 400,000 only. So the World Health Organization says that climate change is amongst our greatest health threats of the 21st century. And it's here, and it's now. Now, I'm going to tell you my story. I'm a clinical associate professor of urology at UT Southwestern. I'm at the VA. I'm also a member of the Sierra Club, and I'm a climate reality leader. I have two patients. Most of my patients have prostate cancer, and I specialize in working with them in terms of wellness, diet, nutrition, in order to have them live healthy lives and deal with the environment. And here is my other passion. His name is Amos William Perry. He was named after the prophet Amos, who spoke of the disparity of wealth between the rich and the poor. The prophet Amos was a social justice warrior. Now, I don't have to teach you all about climate change and global warming and greenhouse gas emissions, but this one graph shows that since the Industrial Revolution, how our temperature has been going up and up and up.
And right here in Dallas, we just had the hottest September and the driest September on record. No measurable rainfall during the whole month.
Hold the mic closer to
Okay.
Dottie and I like to say that this is woeful, and we remember the mnemonic woe for a warming world, our oceans overflowing and dying, and extreme events. And most of us will experience climate change in three ways: our health and our food, through extreme events, and fairness and environmental justice. Our health will be impacted by the heat, by fire, by water, almost like earth, wind, and fire. Now, the health impacts of climate change can't be separated from social justice and the changing faces of environmentalism. Fortunately, Rachel Carson and John Muir are dead. The Cuyahoga River is no longer on fire. Protecting God's creation is not just about saving a pristine wilderness, but it's about where we work, we live, and we play. And above all, climate change is a moral issue. It is immoral to hurt people and to hurt God's creation and to hurt other species. Climate change is about people. People getting sick, being treated unfairly, having our democracy hijacked. And the faces of climate change today are the Reverend William P. Barber of the Poor People's Campaign and General Russell Honoré of the Green Army. Parenthetically, we have Aleka here from the Poor People's Campaign, who Dottie and I are proud to have been her mentor at the Climate Reality meeting and her climate coach. So thank you, Aleka. So, do you have the wrong complexion for protection? Environmental justice is the principle that all people and communities have an equal right to protection. And environmental justice and environmental racism are just two sides of the same coin. Segregation of American cities did not happen by accident. It was planned. It was intentional. It was to preserve property values and to restrict access to amenities. And environmental justice is a little different from environmental racism. Environmental justice applies to the concept of not all people being treated equally, some people being more affected than others, especially those who did the least to contribute to the increase in global warming. But as Professor Bullard says, environmental racism is when the people disproportionately affected are of color, whether it was intentional or unintentional. And there are some in the environmental racism movement who feel that we're sort of covering over the term racism by incorporating it into the concept of environmental justice. And you'll hear us tonight sometimes separate the terms. Because environmental racism is nothing new. African Americans are more prone to live in an area that's within a half mile of a refinery, a landfill, a toxic waste fill, an oil field, than white people of the same economic status. 1.54 times for an African American and 1.38 times for a poor white person. In fact, 335,000 African Americans live within a half mile of one of these facilities in Texas, and that's the Texas is the leading state in the nation. And now I'll let Dottie tell her story.
My story centers on 4 decades of nursing. On the left-hand picture up here is a picture of me about 12 years old. I grew up the oldest of 6 children and always loved taking care of children, my younger brothers and sisters, and also babysitting, which probably propelled me into nursing. You can tell I've been around a while. When have you last seen a nurse with a cap?
About 40 years ago.
About 40 years ago. I've spent my career in critical care as a school nurse, and also I taught pediatric nursing for several years in a community college. Here we go. And this is, like my husband Tony, this is our greatest passion. I've always had an interest in caring for children, and now we have our own grandchild who came into our lives on June 30th, Amos William Perry. And you can tell my mom really loves him to death. My years of school nursing, I saw climate change firsthand, right here in Dallas in my elementary school. Asthma is the leading cause of school absence and our #1 health problem. In fact, the CDC says that 10 million school days are missed every year by America's children. They can't learn if they're not in school, and they can't learn if they're not healthy. And right here in Dallas, I remember one year, beginning of the year, a little boy, 9 years old, moved to my Dallas elementary school from West Texas. And he was 9 years old, a 4th grader, and he had severe asthma. And the dust, have you ever been out to Midland and Odessa? The dust field, the oil fields are so dusty, the air is so dirty. And his mom came in to visit with me right before school started and brought an inhaler and filled out a med form and said, well, I don't think he's really going to need this now that we've moved to Dallas and gotten away from West Texas. But very sadly, the first week of school on a hot August day when the temperatures were about 100 in Dallas and ozone levels were high, this little boy was ushered into the clinic by 2 of his friends, bringing him in during recess, and he could barely catch his breath. He was having a severe asthma attack. By the time I got his airway opened with a rescue inhaler, he sadly looked up and said to me, Nurse Perry, I thought my asthma would be better when I moved to Dallas, and sadly it was not. This child suffered all year along with many of his classmates. And we can see the reason why kids have a lot of asthma here in Dallas, and because it's the dirty air. The same emissions that are heating up our world and warming up the climate are causing us to have air pollution. In fact, dirty air kills more people, takes more lives early than cigarette smoking. And look at this cloud over Dallas. We got a grade of F for the second year in a row from the American Lung Association because of our ozone levels. Ozone comes from, oops, got a little ahead of myself here. Oops, here we go. Ozone levels come from the heat. From the sunny days, the heat combines with the emissions from our automobiles, from factories, from refineries, and it forms a noxious, irritating gas. In fact, hospitals see more admissions for ER admissions when ozone levels are high. And ozone is makes it feel like a sunburn down inside of the lungs. It's very, very irritating. On a child that has asthma, the normal airways are nice and round. When ozone irritates and inflames the airways, they swell, mucus is formed, and they close down, and life-sustaining oxygen cannot get to the body. Have you ever heard anybody wheeze? That's a closing down of airways, and it's a life-threatening emergency. You and I, most adults, take about 20,000 breaths a day, and children breathe even faster. So they're taking in even more of this dirty, polluted air.
And that increase in ozone from the heat is climate change.
Indeed. Not only does the dirty air hurt our lungs, it robs young brains also. Dirty, polluted air gets into the body, and it settles into the white matter of the brain, and children have problems lifelong with learning, their memory, the ability to read, the ability to do math calculations, and is also linked to behavior problems. It affects older brains as well, and is linked to cognitive decline and dementia in older adults as well. Air pollution robs us from the womb to the grave. In fetal development, babies are damaged from the time that they're conceived if their mothers are breathing dirty, polluted air, especially people of color.
And that's environmental racism.
In fact, here's a baby that has high blood pressure. A major Johns Hopkins study showed that mothers that were pregnant and lived in polluted cities had children that were showing up with hypertension at the age of 3 years old. And these kids are going to struggle with high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease all their life, as well as increases the incidence of diabetes. We are seeing type 2 diabetes in young kids in school now. In fact, Texas has mandated screening now to check for signs of type 2 diabetes in kids.
You may not be aware of this, but extreme heat is the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the United States. More than floods, more than hurricanes, more than
Gun violence.
yeah, no.
Tornadoes.
Sorry, okay. And this is because of the risk of dehydration and heat stress and heat stroke. And it affects the most vulnerable populations the most. The people of color, the old, the sick, the vulnerable, the pregnant women, and young children. Humans tolerate heat poorly, and sometimes you may wonder, why does only 2 degrees centigrade, 3.8 degrees of Fahrenheit cause such an increase in extreme heat waves? And that's because as you move the climate curve, bell-shaped curve to the right, details become more pronounced, and you'll have more extreme heat days. Humans tolerate heat poorly. The body to function well needs to stay at a temperature of about 98.6. As you go up in temperature, cellular functions begin to deteriorate. In order to maintain this temperature in a heat wave, the heart has to pump harder and faster, increase its cardiac output in order to drive blood to the surface, in order to let the body perspire and have evaporative cooling to cool itself off. When it does that, it's not only working harder, it's driving blood away from organs like the kidney and the brain and increasing the risk of kidney failure and stroke. Now, normally in the evening, the heart at a lower temperature will be able to relax and the body recover. But in a heat wave, the average temperature at night is still greater than the normal average temperature, and the heart doesn't get a chance to relax, and it continues to have to work harder. And people usually are not aware that more deaths in a heat wave occur at night than during the day. And it's not just the heat, it's the humidity. When the humidity is high, you can't have this evaporative cooling, and the body can't cool down.
So a nursing tip here, if it's 95 degrees or higher outside and 100% humidity, there's no way you can keep yourself hydrated to stay up and keep your body cool. Get inside, don't exercise outside, and be safe.
And cities are hotter than the countryside. And this is due to something called the urban heat island effect. In a city, you have loss of vegetation because of the replacement by the streets. The dark colored streets absorb the heat and make it warmer. The heat reflects off of the buildings onto the streets and keeps it hotter. And you also get waste heat from air conditioning, cars, people and crowds, and you'll find that the temperature in a city is usually about 3.8 degrees higher than in the countryside. But there are areas in the city where your temperature will be 19 to 20 degrees higher. And unfortunately, these are often in the inner city where there is less vegetation, less parks. And studies in Los Angeles, for instance, show that in a heat wave, those that suffer most are the Hispanics and the African Americans. And that is environmental racism.
Indeed.
Now, I'm going to tell you what is going to happen. I don't know exactly when, and I don't know where, but I call this the Katrina heat wave. Katrina caused such devastation in New Orleans because there was a series of system failures, a catastrophic failure of system failures. In a very extreme heat, we're going to have a failure of the grid. It's just a matter of time. The grid is often very close to its maximum, and you'll see rolling brownouts. But if the grid fails and you lose your electricity, you lose your air conditioning, you're stuck in your house, and some of the well-insulated houses can't even open windows well. That house becomes like an oven, and your temperature goes up, and you're cooked in your house, and you die. You can't escape because the electricity is out, the stoplights are all gone, gridlock occurs. You can't fill your tank with gas because the pumps at the gas station won't pump. They have no electricity. So everyone is stuck in a hot, sweltering city that's hotter than the countryside, and you can't get out. And that will happen just as Katrina woke people up to the dangers of environmental and racism. This is what's going to happen in the city and wake people up to extreme heat waves.
Well, it's no doubt that our summers are getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and some cities are getting hotter than others. I want to tell you a story about a lady named Stephanie Pullman who lived near Phoenix, Arizona, Sun City West. Stephanie lived most of her early life in the Midwest in Ohio, but the cold, harsh winters really got to her. So when her last child, her fourth child, graduated from high school, she decided she'd move out to Sun City West, near where one of her friends moved, to where it would be warmer. And she took a job in a hospital, worked in the dietary department until she turned 65, retirement age. She bought a little house, and she retired on her Social Security check. Now the summers were getting hotter and hotter, but three things that Stephanie loved were her little cat Coco, and she loved to garden and plant flowers around her little house, and she also loved to go to garage sales. But Stephanie had a hard time making ends meet on a $1,000 a month Social Security check, and she was very proud. She didn't like to ask her children and her friends for help. So she got a little behind on her electric bill. And when the temperature was 107 degrees in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, she received this notice from Arizona Public Services that they were going to turn off her electricity if she didn't pay her bill. Well, her Social Security check didn't come until the beginning of September. So she paid her house payment and some other bills, and she had $125 left. But her bill was $176. But she went and she paid $125. Wasn't good enough for Arizona Public Services. And in 107-degree temperatures, they turned off her air conditioning. She turned off her electric, and she had no air. She thought she could tough it out, but when her daughter did not hear from her for 5 or 6 days, she called the sheriff department in Maricopa County, and they found her dead in bed. The coroner ruled it environmental heat exposure. Secondary, she had some underlying heart disease as well. When her daughter came to make her funeral arrangements, she did rescue little Coco, was under the bed, but she said to the Arizona Public Services, "You let my mom die for $51. Arizona Public Services is a very, very bad actor. There was a proposition on last year's ballot to go to renewables, to energy for Phoenix, and they spent $38 million getting that bill defeated. Very bad. Very sad story. A life lost for $51.
And that is climate change, and that is environmental injustice. So I'm going to ask you a question: who is the biggest killer in the world, killing more than 500,000 people a year? And I'll give you a hint. It's not a man, and it's not a gun.
Mosquitoes.
It's right. It's that ugly Aedes aegypti, the mosquito, carrier of malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, Zika, West Nile virus. Mosquitoes climate change affects mosquitoes because it, one, increases their range because they can live in warmer weather, and the warming weather extends further and farther. They breed faster because of the heat, and the viruses they carry multiply and breed faster and may be even more infectious. Tropical diseases are on the move. Malaria is spreading. Dengue fever is coming to the United States. I fear Rift Valley fever is coming. In a stable environment, you don't have emerging diseases. In Texas, we have 3 major viruses causing infection. We have West Nile virus, Zika, and we have tick-borne disease, Lyme disease. West Nile virus came to the United States in 1998, and in North Texas, we've had 3 epidemics. The last was in 2012, in which there were about 400 cases and 21 deaths from West Nile encephalitis. And the reason that we've had these epidemics is because in those years there were less hard freeze nights in the winter, so the mosquitoes were not killed. They increased in number, and the viruses that they were carrying increased in number. Zika is a devastating virus. It bites when it bites a pregnant woman, it causes congenital anomalies, and the children that are born have a congenital anomaly called microcephaly, where their skull doesn't develop, their brain doesn't develop, they're developmentally delayed, they're blind, and they require a lifetime of care. And this affects people of all pregnant women of all races. The most common disease related to climate change, and it's been called the first epidemic of climate change, is tick-borne disease or Lyme disease. And it's carried by the black-legged deer tick. And with the warming weather, this deer tick is not only increased in number, but it spread its range all the way up to the Great Plains and to New England. And its infestation in the woods is preventing people from going to camp. Or when your children go to camp, they have to have tick checks. And that's climate change.
These are some symptoms of Lyme disease. We used to think that the bullseye rash was characteristic, but only about 40% of the people do get the characteristic bullseye rash. 20% get lifelong problems such as neurologic problems. This guy has facial palsy. I have a friend that had a stroke from Lyme disease. It can cause heart disease, heart problems, affects the heart, and also arthritis. Affects children as well. I have school nurse friends in Highland Park that have several kids in the school that are being treated for Lyme disease right now, right here.
If air pollution, heat waves, and mosquito vector-borne illnesses weren't enough, we also have waterborne disease, which is due to increased rain and flooding.
When we were talking about that WOA, the signs of climate change, O for oceans are overflowing. And we're seeing this as the oceans are overflowing, the sea level is rising. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says that overall there's been about an 8-inch sea level rise in the United States, whereas right here in Texas, we have between a 9 to 13-inch sea level rise on the Texas coast. And the hurricanes and floods are bringing waterborne diseases as we're having these floods and hurricanes and extreme rain events caused by dirty water. And it doesn't take much to contaminate water. A quarter of a teaspoon, pulled this out of my kitchen drawer today, a quarter of a teaspoon is equivalent to about a gram. If you take a toilet that backs up or sewage that spills during a hurricane, it contains millions of viruses, bacteria, parasites, very, very deadly illnesses. We're seeing sunny day flooding. This is a picture of Miami Beach when the high tide comes in, the streets flood. But right down the highway 300 miles from here in Galveston, we're seeing it as well. When the high tides come in, they're now doing a major infrastructure project on Broadway, the major street that goes through Galveston, through the historic district. They're having to reslope the road and put in drains because of sunny day flooding. And the sunny day, this flooding that gets into our water supply can cause waterborne diseases, also brings salt The salt intrusion causes high blood pressure and can cause a condition called preeclampsia in pregnant women and preterm labor.
And what is that? That's climate change.
So with water problems, we have either too much, too little, or it's too dirty.
Dottie, the old Cowboys had it right.
What was it? What was that?
Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting.
Joe Keck said he loved to get that joke in. With Hurricane Harvey 2 years ago, we saw from the refineries along the coast a toxic soup of petrochemicals. These petrochemicals cause cancers and a whole host of health ill effects. Just last month, when Hurricane Imelda hit southeast Texas, 43 inches of rain were dropped, and the Houston Chronicle reported last week that there were 100,000 pounds of toxins that were released, and 36,000 pounds, 1/3 of that was released by our friend, the Exxon Corporation. The corporation that keeps on giving us bad things. In Texas, over 300,000 African Americans live within 1/2 mile of an oil refinery, an oil field, or a landfill.
And again, what is that? That's environmental racism.
That's right. Our E of woe, we're having extreme events and they bring along their health impacts. The climate crisis is like loading the dice in favor of extreme events. It's not causing hurricanes to happen or rainstorms, but it's making them worse. And injustice as well. I'm not moving. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay, there we go. The story of Hurricane Harvey began with a number 51. 51 inches of rain fell across Houston in 4 days. And then it brought a host of health problems. And there's another number 51. A major study after Hurricane Harvey showed that 51% of those who went through Harvey either had a new health problem or a worsening of an existing health problem, in addition to the cost. Mental health problems, suicides, depression, anxiety, 2/3 reported mental health effects. Like little Raymond Blair, who was 11 years old, and his mom told the story that every time it rained after Hurricane Harvey, he had anxiety attacks because he was worried that it would happen again. And that was not uncommon. We see that a lot in children. And this picture's forever etched on our mind of those residents that sat in that Dickinson nursing home and had to wait to be rescued. Again, the most vulnerable suffer. Those who do the least to cause climate change suffer the worst.
And what is that? That's environmental injustice and climate change.
And our hotter years bring more fires, more lightning strikes when it's warmer outside with every 1 degree centigrade of heat. Do you know what the most common target for lightning is?
I can tell you what it's not. It's not a 1-iron, because not even God can hit a 1-iron.
Now, Sierra Club will know what's the most common target for a tree. And right now we're seeing this in Alaska. There's 70 wildfires in Alaska. They've had a exceptionally warmer temperatures. Their vegetation has dried out. 70 wildfires and only 1 is contained. And the California wildfires from last year, the physicians are now seeing a year later 15% increase in asthmatics who never even had asthma before. So it's really causing profound health problems. Scary.
I'm going to tell you the story about the birth of the environmental justice movement. The place, Warren County, the year 1978. Robert Burns and Buck Ward decided to save some money and avoid some of the regulations on disposing of their toxic, cancer-causing waste from their transformer factory. So in the dead of night in June, they loaded up their trucks, and over a 2-week period, they dumped 31,000 gallons along 200 miles of North Carolina highway. Well, of course, they went to jail. But now North Carolina had to clean up this toxic, cancer-causing sludge. And what they decided to do through the legislature was create a toxic waste landfill. And without consulting the people of Warren County, they located it in Warren County, specifically in Shoco Township. Now, Warren County was 65% African American, the highest in percentage in the state. And Shoco County was 75% African American. So, in September 15th, 1982, 7,000 trucks containing this cancer-causing PCB-containing sludge was sent to Shoco County. 115 members of the Colby Baptist Church lied down in the road to prevent delivery of that sludge. They were joined by national civil rights leaders from the NAACP and Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And with that marriage of environmental concerns and the civil rights movement, we have the birth of the environmental justice movement. Now, parenthetically, I hate to say, they were not joined by any national environmental leaders. And that is environmental racism. Dirty air, dirty drinking water, urban heat disproportionately in parts of the city, and the location of polluting facilities affect people of color and African Americans and Hispanics more than white people, and that's environmental racism. A lack of diversity has, in the mainstream environmental organizations, has resulted in a greater emphasis on pristine wilderness rather than the inner city concrete justice. And unfortunately, the age of ecology in many ways has become the age of environmental inequality. In many ways, the environmental movement has been slow to come around to the environmental justice movement. And some of this is due to the DNA. Many of the early environmental leaders believed in preserving a pristine wilderness, but they believed in saving that wilderness for a certain group of people, for upper class, well-educated white people, and not immigrants or African Americans or Hispanics. In fact, some of the wilderness and parks they were preserving were segregated. This lack of diversity in mainstream environmental movements means that their voices of the inner city are not heard. I think the word environment itself has different meanings to different people. I just always think of a little girl looking out her window in Highland Park at the Dallas Country Club, sees a very different environment from Marsha Jackson's daughter looking out her window at Shingle Mountain. Dr. Dorcetta Taylor, Director of Diversity at the University of Michigan School of Environment and Natural Resources, did a study of diversity in environmental organizations. She looked at the composition of the staff and the board, and between 2014 and 2016, and found that 80% of the boards were white and 85% of the staff was white. We redid the study in 2018 and found that 83% of boards were white and 89.5% of the staff was white. Now, in that diversity are women, different races, but when you just look at the African Americans on these boards, it was about 3.9%. And that is environmental racism. This is the 2019 Sierra Club National Board of Directors.
This is our board of directors.
Does it reflect the face of America?
We have a ways to go.
Now, UT Southwestern did a study on life expectancy by zip codes. A baby boy, our grandson, born this year, has a life expectancy of 76 years. A baby boy born in Highland Park has a life expectancy of 82 years. Baby boy born in South Oak Cliff has a life expectancy of 66 years. And as Dr. Bullard said, whether intentional or unintentional, that's environmental
Racism.
Got it.
Your zip code predicts better than your genetic code. When I taught pediatric nursing and took my clinical group to Children's Hospital, of course, we saw the #1 emergency room visit was because of asthma or a respiratory problem. But African American children had twice the incidence of asthma. They were 4 times as likely to be hospitalized and tragically had 10 times the risk of dying from an asthma attack.
And what is that?
Environmental
Racism.
And climate change.
And then the cost of asthma. The CDC says that it costs America $15 billion a year to take care of asthmatics. This asthma inhaler is an albuterol inhaler commonly used as a rescue inhaler. At CVS and at Walgreens, it costs about $75. Take a mom or dad that makes minimum wage salary, they couldn't afford this. 1 in 6 Texans are not covered by health insurance. So those that are poor are certainly more disadvantaged.
When it was a true environmental protection agency, the EPA came up with an environmental quality index, the EQI, and it rated every county in the United States and gave it an EQI. The higher the level, the EQI, the worse the environmental quality with pollutants and toxins and chemical plants. And we have found that in the counties with the highest EQI, the worst pollution, there's an increased risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and in the aggressiveness of the cancer. And also found that African Americans live disproportionately in these counties. And what is that?
Environmental racism. And it seems like I have all the sad stories
Do we
here.
have any happy stories about it?
This is
Your grandson.
my
Yes,
my grandson, and we do have some hope and some positive words in a few minutes. This is a story about a little girl named Sierra Rose who was 4 years old, and her mom is shown here holding her picture, and her dad is holding her younger sister. They were releasing balloons in her memory. Sadly, Sierra Rose died of leukemia, died of cancer. She lives in a community in Manchester, Texas, that's right next to a Valero refinery. They live on a pile of toxic poisons, and the cancer risk for children is 56% higher in this community.
And what is that?
Environmental racism.
You guys have learned. Well, we have solutions. The climate crisis is 100% human caused and 100% human solvable. I like to say that climate devastation is our World War Zero, zero for emissions. But we believe the Greta generation will prevail and benefit our health, economy, and democracy. Overcoming climate devastation requires understanding two key points. One, again, it is immoral to hurt other people, species, and God's creation. I am a carbon abolitionist, to be put it right out there in front. And the second point to understand is that in science we define something as a wicked problem, meaning it's a complex problem that doesn't have a simple solution, and that as you change or address one aspect, you have other aspects to deal with. And this wicked problem will require a change in laws and policies. We can't just put the onus on individual behaviors and individuals reducing their carbon footprint. In many ways, that's like blaming the victim for the crime. Only a moral issue can drive a movement to fight fossil fuel money. The abolitionists with slavery, suffrage, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam movement, the LGBT movement.
It's a tongue twister.
And there's interesting studies that the tipping point in a society to get society to change is only getting 25% of the people committed. Once you get 25% of the people committed, the rest of society will change. And I'm sorry if I'm going to offend some of my Citizens Climate Lobby friends who might be here tonight. There is no silver bullet to solve the climate crisis. If we fix climate change today, we still have other planetary boundaries to address. What Dottie and I like to say is we need a silver buckshot solution.
That's right.
We got to get the money out of politics.
Yes.
We have to green our way of life and our economy.
That's right.
We have to strengthen our democracy.
That's right.
And we have to create a social and health equality. Now, I don't want to say that there are no room for individual action. Individual actions matter. If, as I say, climate change is a moral cause to action, then we can't act immorally. We can't increase our carbon footprint. That would be immoral. And we also, as individuals, must walk the walk. And why must we walk the walk? Because we got to show other people we're committed, it's important, and we've got to demonstrate to our leaders and legislatures that we're committed. And we can't do that if we're sitting on our butts and watching television and in the air conditioning and not reducing our carbon footprint. And we must have a just transition. We must invest in frontline communities, have a healthy energy democracy, and by that, Dottie and I mean, first of all, universal health care. We need local solutions and local leaders, and with the devastation of the climate, we need to bolster our public health infrastructure. So, now I'm going to tell you another story. I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you the story of John Francis, the planet walker. And this story starts in 1971 in San Francisco. John, a young man of 26, witnessed the collision of the Arizona Standard and the Oregon Standard oil tankers in San Francisco Bay, and the devastation that the oil spill did to the bay. John thought, well, maybe I should just give up riding in motorized vehicles with internal combustion engines. In 1972, a friend of his died in a motor accident, and John made his pledge not to ride in them anymore, and that he was going to walk as an example to the people and convince other people of the importance of doing this. And so he did not ride in a motorized vehicle for 22 years and began walking. Now, for those of us Sierra Club members, this harkens back to John Muir walking 1,000 miles. Well, John decided to get his college degree because he thought he could make more of an impact. So he walked from California to Ashland, Oregon, and got a college degree from the University of Southern Oregon. During his walking, he thought he would be an example, as I said, but a lot of people challenged him and argued with him, so he decided he wouldn't argue back, he would just listen. And he would communicate by sign language, by writing, and through his music, and by listening. And so he began a vow of silence that went on for 17 years. And he went through college and didn't say a word, but communicated in that way. After getting his college degree, he walked to Missoula, Montana, and got a master's degree in environmental science. He then walked down to Madison, Wisconsin, and got a PhD in land management from the University of Wisconsin. And while he was working on his thesis in 1989, there was the Exxon Valdez spill, and this drew attention to his work. So with his PhD, newly minted, Dr. Francis walked to Washington, D.C., and went to work for OPA 90, the Oil Protection Act of 1990, and started writing the regulations on dealing with oil spills. His work was noticed by the U.S. Coast Guard, and he was hired by the Coast Guard and finally wrote the final regulations on dealing with oil spills in the United States. And so now I'm going to introduce you to the Planet Walker, Dr. John Francis. Now, you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you thought when Mike telling this story that Dr. Francis was white? That's the response I get from most audiences, except for one audience that was predominantly African American, and they saw him as white. And this deals with some of the environmental movement's predisposition to think that this is a white project, a white problem.
And to illustrate that, Tony talked about Dr. Dorcetta Taylor and her research on the diversity in environmental groups. Here she is, a lady that has 2 PhDs, 3 master's degrees, and 2 undergraduate degrees, and she's chairman of the department, professor at University of Michigan Environmental Studies. And she was asked to speak at a major national conference on the East Coast. And as she was sitting in the room at a table with other environmentalists before she spoke, she tried to participate in the conversation, and this one guy just kept shutting her down. They wouldn't pay any attention to her. And then once she stood up and gave the keynote address and then sat down and gave the table, that same man who was putting her down and ignoring her came running over, tripped over a chair, and said, "I would have talked to you if I'd known who you were." Do y'all know that story? I would have talked to you if I'd known who you were. And what is this? An example of
racism and sexism.
And gender discrimination too.
They would never have treated Dr. Catherine Hayhoe that way. No. Dottie and I hope that someday we might see Dr. Dorcetta Taylor on the National Board of Directors of the Sierra Club.
And maybe Dr. Francis too.
Dr. John Francis. So what do mainstream environmental organizations need to do? We need to talk. We need to talk to minorities, people of color. We need to reach out. We need to make joint movements with groups like the Poor People's Campaign and the Green Army.
Woohoo!
Thank you, Elena.
I'm part of all 3, so, yeah.
We can't do diversity on a zero budget. It costs money. It costs money to recruit. It costs money to set up the staff. It costs money to create the jobs. And the jobs we create have to be meaningful, and that people with education can rise in these jobs, and they need to have their voices heard. Because if their voices aren't heard in the environmental organization, then the organizations can't change. So why does a Medicare-age couple care about our human future? Well, we consider ourselves to be part of the human flow, the great chain of being that extends from one generation to another. But it's more than that. It's continuing the chain of caring for others that we have dedicated our lives to.
So why does climate crisis matter to us?
Amos William Perry.
Very. And we believe that every child deserves to grow up in a world that's safe, healthy air to breathe, and healthy water to drink, and live in a happy, healthy, sustainable community. This is a book we read to our baby Amos.
We have time for questions.
We have a couple handouts here too, before you leave.
Yeah, just come up and
Hal,
get
get
them.
them.
Questions?
I don't have a question, just a comment. I work some as a school nurse part-time, and that's when you really see how sick our kids are. And those inhalers are more like 200 to 300, and the parents need 2 of them. Because think about it, if you have an emergency at home and inhalers in the cabinet with me, then so they're running 2 of them. And so one of them, the insurance company may not cover, and some people have 2 and 3 kids with asthma, and the insurance company, well, they have trouble getting all of those inhalers covered.
Thanks for sharing. It's a real challenge to take care of these kiddos. Thank you.
No other questions?
Well, thank you so much for this presentation. It was wonderful. These are issues that Sierra Club, as the interim director of the state chapter, these are issues, the issue of Sierra Club is primarily, as our membership is primarily white, are usually middle class or upper middle class. Our board tends to be the same. Our staff is changing over time, but it has a long way to go, so thank you for bringing that up. I do want to make a plug that the Trump administration rolling back regulations that help control the climate through methane and also have direct impacts on people's health, especially communities of colors. That's the reason we need everybody who can come to that hearing next Thursday. So there's something you can do right here in Dallas.
I'm speaking. Yeah, I'm speaking. Yeah, I'm speaking.
So that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. Hi, how you doing? My question is Mr. Cyrus, is that your name?
Yeah.
And thank you, Dr. Thank you, Nurse, for that wonderful presentation. But mine's more of a statement. When you're talking about representing people of color, because they're the ones who live the closest to these environmental issues, one of the things that really could help is that, and this is to Mr. Cyrus, is if we had people in the community that are living amongst these Superfund sites like myself and Tamika, if there were paid positions, because as he stated, there ain't no money in there. As she stated, there's no money to buy the inhalers. But there should be something in the community where there should be a paid position for like people like me and Tamika who have experiences in this, for us to do recruiting, for us to do the work. See, because the reason that the reason that it's not happening is because there's no funding. We have to go, we live within the community, but we also, we do our work for free. But we live in these communities up under concrete plants in areas that the soil is contaminated. So if we're to do the work, we still have to travel, we still have to do that. So I'm saying to Mr. Cyrus, when you go back Talk to your people and say, listen, you have people that are willing to work, people that are disabled that are willing to work to do this, but we cannot do it with no money. See, because I catch the bus, but I'm willing to go wherever I can if somebody give me bus fare to go pass the information out. I'm willing to go wherever I can to pass flyers out. That's the reason that you're not getting us, is because nobody's funding us, but yet we're the ones that are dying the most. See, so that is very important, that you talk to those people to let them know. We can't even bury, we have trouble burying our dead that die from cancer, that die from emphysema, that die from leukemia. But why do we have to wait till our people to die to talk about these issues when there should be funding that come in the community so we can prevent these type of things? So that's what I'm saying. We need the bread.
Yeah.
We need the bread. We need the funding, just like everything else. We want to live, but there's a quality of life that we must have, and that is called money.
Yeah.
To get the word out. Because we're doing this stuff on back sheets of paper when we do surveys. We're doing it on our own. And that needs to stop. These organizations are big enough to come and do these presentations. They should be big enough to fund the people that are dying from these things. And that's honest truth. So I'm saying that to you,
That's a good point.
it shouldn't be a point. It should be a reality. Like we're talking about climate reality. These people need to get paid so we can save our communities. And me and you should have a talk after.
Okay, I had a question. Further questions for Mr. Reed can occur after the meeting. Wendell, did you have a question?
No, we have a lot of new people here tonight, and everyone here needs to know, first of all, the Dallas Sierra Club is an all-volunteer organization. We're not funded by anybody other than our own fundraising within this club of volunteers. Within this room right here, I know for a fact thousands and thousands and thousands of hours have been put forth for environmental justice and for environmental causes. But, and I will tell you, we have a long history, starting with Molly, starting with Rita, starting with David Griggs, of cooperating with Tamika, Joppy, Sand Branch, all of those battles. We have been there toe to toe. Obviously, we don't live down there, but never think just because we have a white skin that we don't care, because the people in this room have dedicated their life to it, and they are volunteers. But I agree with what you're saying. Whatever money is there, we need to collaborate more and get the people that can do the surveys, that can help. And I think the Dallas Sierra Club, as a former chair, we need to take a lead in that endeavor.
Well, if there's no further questions, thank you to Dr. Perry and Mrs. Perry. It was certainly food for thought. Tony and Dottie.
And speaking of food,
Where do we go next?
Food. Let me make
Where
a
do we
couple-
go now, Dan?
Well, you're not going anywhere. Okay, a couple of short announcements and then we'll adjourn. Remember, Sierra Club 101, if you're interested, back in this corner, back here. And after everybody leaves here, a bunch of us will go to the Blue Goose restaurant up on Midway, and we will buy nachos for the people that come. Otherwise, you're on your own for the drinks and the food. Okay, so.
and wait, sorry, last announcement. I have a new staff member, Shane Johnson. He just walked in. Shane just got hired. He's in Austin, but he's a distributed community organizer on clean energy issues. So he can come to communities, help on these things. So that's Shane Johnson. So meet him if you want.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Dan.